So cybersecurity professionals now have to deal not only with automation, but also with AI. There's no question that AI is a major force in our industry. And it's creating an explosion in workloads, like these non-human sort of capabilities that create a mesh and drive the way the internet and the way businesses work today. I've got a guest here that I've invited that I think you're going to enjoy. I hope you stick around, my friend. I've known him for a while. He's an industry expert, and he's going to give a little bit of insight into how we secure these workloads, these non-human workloads, using something a little different than traditional IAM. So I hope you stick around. I think you're going to enjoy the discussion today. Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from TAG. Welcome to our discussion today. I have an industry expert here with me, Apurva Davé, who's been in the industry for a while. He's working for a very cool company now called Aembit. He runs a strategy there. So as you'd imagine, I love talking to Apurva about different things that are going on. So we're going to get into AI and automation, IAM, a lot of things that are interesting. But Apurva, nice to see you, man. How's everything going?
Ed, great to see you again. Thank you for the kind words. Honestly, I love talking to you. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new, and I suspect today will be no different.
Well, you always pick interesting areas to work in. I know, one thing you and I've been talking about, and also David, from your company, David Goldstein, is this idea that we're all really comfortable with IAM, but now we see this change, like there are these workloads, these non-human capabilities. Take me through kind of this explosion in workloads and why maybe there's a little bit of a mismatch there with the way we normally do IAM.
Yeah, so I think you're right. Let me go back and tell a quick story, if you don't mind, which is one of the things that David experienced when he was founding Ambit, which was his past company was one of the first user zero trust products on the market.
Mm.
And David and team eventually sold that company to Netscope. What was interesting is this thing just absolutely exploded. Everybody was using something, kind of progressed beyond VPNs to something user zero trust driven. People started asking, can I stick this thing between, David, can I stick your product between one app and another app instead of a user in an app? And it turned out that many of the same dynamics that were impacting users were also impacting applications, maybe to a greater degree, in the sense that the network is no longer your perimeter, right? You don't control that anymore. Apps are everywhere. You're using SaaS applications. You're building distributed microservices that take advantage of some capabilities in AWS combined with your on-prem data center. How do you manage that connectivity between all of those applications? And David's past product wasn't a right fit. It was a network product. And the reality is this is an access problem. And an access problem generally starts with identity. Who are you? Or what are you? And should you have access? Those are kind of the key questions. And that actually was where Ambit started and why this problem is so interesting.
I
Now,
mean,
I
people
don't
branch between human and non-human, right? Isn't that the key point from identity perspective?
Yeah, I think there's two things. It's like you start with human and non-human, right? And you say, well, if they work the same, if they look the same, they work the same, then they are the same, manage them the same. The reality is they're completely different, other than the idea that you need to manage access, right? So totally different tech stack, totally different model of implementation, totally different automation requirements, and we can go into all that stuff. I suspect we'll go into a bunch of that. At the heart of it, though, the biggest problem people see very early on is there is a massive amount of non-human identities within their environment today, and it's growing at a much faster rate than the human identities in your company. How many people are you going to hire this year? Right? So if you're a large company and you're growing crazy fast, maybe you're going to hire 3-5% more people, right? Non-human identities aren't really mapped to the growth of your company in a lot of ways, or limited by the human population on Earth, right? Like you can make as many of those as you need to get your software working. And the research out there shows maybe as many as 45 non-human identities for every single human identity in your environment.
I've heard David say that 45 to 1 before. I mean, is AI driving a bunch of this?
That's a great point. So I think that AI is a key driver today and will be a dominant driver in the future. Let me explain what I mean. Today, much of the drive around non-human identities has been kind of driven by two things. One was a shift to cloud, right? So you're moving services which you used to have on-prem to another service that has a different model. All of a sudden, you've got pieces in multiple places, multiple identities or non-human identities you need to manage. At the same time, with the shift to cloud has been a move in software architecture, which is decomposing monolithic applications into microservices or third-party services that you use. Along comes AI. And what AI does is, first of all, there's a new set of data and a new resource you need to use. But then there's an explosion in agents that are working alongside your other applications, and the need for your developers to build new services on top of AI, leveraging other AI, whether it's within your proverbial walls or leveraging third-party systems. So now we have a new accelerant on top of what we already have with cloud and kind of service decoupling to create an absolute perfect storm in the acceleration of non-human identities.
So now the big question, what do we do? I mean, you just take an existing IAM and sort of fit it to the model. I mean, I'm leading the witness here because I know that's not the answer, but tell me how you guys have approached the problem.
Well, let me just start and say, like, look out there, if you have tried to fit your existing IAM model to to non-human
Yeah,
identities,
maybe it wasn't such a dumb question because a lot of people do that, right? Maybe by
it's a natural place to start,
question.
right? Natural place to start. It's like, I got a hammer,
You would,
like, let me
that's
bang that thing in. And so if you've done it, I would love to hear from you and understand, kind of how it's worked. Now, I think this comes back one of the earliest things you just mentioned, which is this idea of human versus non-human, right? And understanding the differences in how you implement human versus non-human identity and access comes from understanding the differences in these two categories of data consumers, if you will, right? Because at the end of the day, we're really all trying to protect our data. Humans sit there, they can type on a keyboard. They typically are associated with one user profile within an application. They can do things like MFA, where they enter a code that they have on their authenticator, and all these things that you've come to expect from human behavior, and you can map a system of identity and policy management to that behavior. Now, non-humans have a totally different set of behavior patterns, first of all, right? They tend to be read heavy in data, they work consistently, they may come and go. At the rate of your infrastructure. So if you're, using, I don't know, like serverless scripts to do point in time processing, those things could live for a minute, 5 minutes, and then die, right? So you see very quickly, if you think about the scale we talked about and then the behavior difference, it's unlikely that you'll be able to manage them with the same tools that you manage your human users today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, humans have always been around secrets, right? That's always been when you learn cybersecurity 20 years ago or whenever, in my case, back in the Stone Ages. I mean, the idea of managing secrets and creds, that's how you did it. And one thing I'm jumping to maybe some of my understanding of your platform is that you guys have been able to solve some of that because that's the thing that freaks out a CISO when secrets get compromised. A long-lived secret sitting somewhere, forget it, you're dead. I think you guys have, it's not only that you've done something for workloads, but I think it's even an improvement over existing IAM from what I can see.
So, well, I appreciate that, and let's talk a little bit about how we approach the problem and what we do with it. So, Ambit's view is that we're creating Okta for workloads, And the idea here is, of course, at the high level, you want to be able to manage these non-human identities in the same way you manage human identities. And what does that mean? So you want an identity-driven approach, first of all. You can identify workloads much like you identify humans. You want a policy-driven approach, a way for security or the IAM team to set guardrails that say these apps can talk to these resources. And then you want a secretless approach. And you just talked a little bit about secrets, right? These hard-coded, maybe vaulted, long-lived credentials that give access between 2 points. We think in the future, you're not going to use long-term secrets, but just-in-time secrets. Short-term, short-window access that's injected in real time. Now, if you take these three characteristics, identity-driven, policy-based, secretless access, you want to do two things. You want to then automate the whole thing because you can't have humans in the loop on this scale and deployment of non-human identities. And you want it to kind of mimic what you do with humans, which is like getting to that point of understanding who's logging in, giving them MFA-like capabilities, and making it really simple for your developers to implement all that while your security teams can oversee the guardrails. And in a nutshell, this is what Aembit set out to build, right? So we wanted to build this control plane for non-human access management. And that's where we are today.
What are the big integrations there? Because like as you're describing it, myself and other people like me implement these things. I'm going to like the diagrams in my mind, like, all right, I've got to connect this to my SIM. I've got to connect this. Like, what does IDP mean in this context? What are the that kind? Where's the CA? All that is it. I'm going to guess that when one deploys this, probably the preponderance of work is around integration, or do I have that wrong?
I think you're right. We do have a product here or a capability here that requires integration in your environment to work well. And so it's actually one of the first things we set out to do is make sure that we could hit or service the bulk of enterprise environments out there. And if you think about our model, you've got consumers of data and sources of data, right? We call them workloads and services that you're trying to get to. And that's the access we're trying to manage. So we have a wide variety of integrations that start with the workloads that are requesting access. So all your clouds, on-premise environments, VMs, containers, serverless, all that stuff we supported today. And it was kind of, out of the box, we needed to do that. The other thing we needed to do is support the major authentication methods that a client workload would use to get to a service. And what's interesting here, again, in contrast with the human world, workloads use different authentication methods than a human does. So typically with a human, if a human's going through Okta, they're going to get a SAML token and you're good to go. And it's pretty much the same everywhere. With non-human identities, you have maybe half a dozen ways to connect. And so we've built out of the box support for all half a dozen of those and allowed you then to kind of simplify that connection. If I think of integration, those are kind of the two major forms of integration. We've done some like example videos of showing people how that works out. So for example, a developer who's building their first AI agent and is using ChatGPT in the background, right, as the service. So we kind of lay that out and show them how it works. Back again to your AI example, we think that's where the world is going. That's the core of it. And then there are a host of integrations that sit around us to make this really easy to operate in your environment. Again, another important example, how do you operate this at scale? Well, we've enabled you to do a non-human access management as code. So you can integrate us with Terraform, deploy your workloads or have your developers deploy the workloads and code up the access policy at the same time. Highly scalable, no humans necessary to make that happen. And then finally, downstream, we use integrations like SIMs to make sure that you're doing IT threat detection and response in one place, right? Make it easy for you.
What does a POC look like? Like if I think, all right, I want to do this. Do people usually take a couple of workloads and do something, or do you do the whole kit and caboodle? What's been your experience?
I think, well, so first of all, I think you know security teams well enough. They tend to be conservative, as rightfully they should be, right? What I see oftentimes is that they understand, security teams understand where their most sensitive resources are. And their goal typically, when they do a test or a trial with us, is to pick one or two of those where they can try this out. And when they try this out, they're going to do, a couple of things. They're going to do, how do we get identity? How do I set up policy? Can I do secretless? Can I automate this using my stack? Really, really important. And then the other thing, which is really interesting, and we didn't really talk about in that ecosystem, was how can I do MFA-like access for my workloads, right? It's like, okay, cool. I see the basics of Ambit. Now, can I layer on conditional access based on the posture rating that CrowdStrike is giving my workload, right? That's when the things get super cool and people's eyes light up and say, oh my God, all of a sudden, like I can really attest to whether or not this workload is in good enough shape to reach into my sensitive financial database, right?
You said
So,
the magic word, attest. So that means the auditors are going to be peeking at this thing at some point, right?
well, I don't know, like, it's hard to oftentimes use excitement and auditors at the same time, but I will tell you what is
Pain in the
exciting.
neck if you get it wrong, right?
Well, that's the thing. It is exciting when your auditors just say okay, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden you've got a central place that shows you all workload accesses based on the identity of the client and showing that it's using a short token instead of a long-lived credential. All of a sudden, those reporting headaches go out the window.
That is music to my ears. Well, listen, I hope people watching the discussion here get in touch. Is the website the right place for them to be in touch with you?
You know what? We're out there, so you can find our website. You can contact us on LinkedIn, or find me in particular. We're fine. We're also happy.
You're no wallflower, right?
Or yeah, well, you've probably already figured that out. Generally what we do when clients come to us is like it's I would love to say that they just show up and 5 minutes later they've downloaded the agent or getting rolling. Typically, what happens is we do an architecture discussion with the customer and see where they want to go. We've worked with Fortune 250 customers who are using us in production down to relatively new startups. So I think depending on where you are in your life, your approach here might be different. We've got experience with all of those, and as a result, we really like to work with people, kind of a lot the way I'm talking with you, right? It's like understand what they need, and then we'll do the right thing with you. We'll partner with you to get it done.
Well, it's awesome stuff. I'm a big fan of the platform. Also a big fan of you and David and the team. You guys are an awesome group. I think this is a pretty important area. I hope people watching will take the time to be in touch with you. You'll have to let us know. So thanks for your time today. I always enjoy the chat and I appreciate you sharing with our folks here.
Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate the conversation.
Very good. And for everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.